Good morning, beautiful people of the Center for Spiritual Living. Oh, hello, River. Nice of you to come back to service. You know how I can tell when people aren't at service? It's because everybody sits in the same place. It's so funny. I can say, oh, that person's not there. So we are tying up a whole month of messages about service as a spiritual practice. And on the first week of the month, we talked about service to your country. The second week was service to your world. And the third week, service to your family with our wonderful guest speaker, Reverend Michael Gott. And if you missed any of those things, maybe your travels took you out of time, I want you to know that you can pick up a CD of the audio recording of any of those messages in the bookstore. And you can also go to our website, www.cslsr.org, and watch all of the video recordings for free. There's a whole library there of all of our past recordings, as well as an online library of audio recordings that you can subscribe to and can have downloaded to your smart device free of charge. I like to let people know that because sometimes they'll say to me, I was out of town and I feel like I'm out of step with the program. You don't have to be. There's absolutely no excuse. And every week at the end of service, I've been reading a prayer that is in the back of the spiritual resource booklet on practicing service as a spiritual practice, which you can pick up at the bookstore, but which you can also download for free from our website. And in there, I've been reading this prayer, Spiritual Mind Treatment by Reverend James Golden, that has to do with service as a spiritual practice. And I mention it because yesterday at the annual The Consciousness of Savor workshop, by the way, free also, there really isn't any excuse. There really isn't. There is no reason why you should not be engaged in your spiritual education. There are so many resources, but that is a tangent. Anyway, at the annual workshop, Savor as a Spiritual Practice, we got to see a video of the author of that prayer, Reverend James Golden, talking about this concept, savor, as a spiritual practice. And he explained that savor, S-E-V-A, is a Sanskrit word that is translated as something like selfless service or spiritual service, or devotional service, something like that. And the question arises, well, why don't you just say volunteering? Seems simpler. Well, the reason why is because there is a subtle difference between the two. Between volunteering and savor, they're very similar, but they're not exactly the same. Just like we tend to use the phrase spiritual mind treatment to talk about prayer because the two are not exactly the same. They're very similar, but they're not the same. And as you study spiritual mind treatment, you realize that those subtle changes are actually very deep. They're foundational differences. They make all the difference in the world once you understand them. So similarly, there are these subtle but profound differences between seva and volunteering. Seva is not volunteering. Similar in many ways. And what I mean by that is people who are volunteering are not necessarily doing what they're doing as a spiritual practice. Yes, they are doing good volunteering by reaching out, engaging in the world, helping where help is needed, all of which is wonderful and gratefully accepted. But there is another dimension that is added on top of the doing when you're in seva. Might even say that seva goes deeper in that it seeks to look into the experience of the doing in your own consciousness while you're doing the actual tasks, the things, the same things that you would be doing when you're volunteering, but now you're looking into it. All right, let me try and find another way to say this. Savor is the idea that not only am I doing whatever it is I'm doing for its own sake. Yes, I'm taking out the garbage so the house doesn't stink. And yes, I'm picking up the cigarette butts outside of the front of the center because that's where they are. Not only am I doing that, but at the same time that I'm doing the doing, I'm looking deep into it because I'm looking beyond the idea of accomplishing the task to get it done. I'm looking into it because my mind is on the bigger picture of beyond cleaning up to how is it all connected. So this specific shift of attitude that is in savor then presents to me a terrific benefit, not only for me, but for the people that I'm serving because of the change in my attitude. All right, let me try and find another way to say this. Savor is a conscious intention to offer up the fruit of my effort as my spiritual practice, which some would describe as service to God. Now, as soon as I read that phrase as the topic for today, it took me into a practice that I love to do, which is to go around and ask people their opinion. I've just been asking random people, what comes to mind when you hear the phrase service to God? You ought to try that. It's a great practice. Just ask and listen. You discover people are truly wise. You can be in church all the time. Just ask people, what comes to mind when you think of service to God? And to a person, they all responded in a very similar way by beginning to say to me, well, Edward, it really depends on what you mean by the term God. And that took me right back to the beginning of my journey when I first walked into a center for spiritual living, and I recognized right away that the conversation in the room, well, there was a new idea about God that I hadn't encountered before. They most certainly were not talking about the God of my childhood. They most certainly, when they used the phrase God, were not talking about a regional deity with more loyalty to one gender or one nation or one this or that or any of the things that divide us. They weren't talking about that. And so I realized plenty quickly at the Center for Spiritual Living, I was going to have to expand and grow my concept of God into something larger and even consider using a completely different word. Now, there's a practice you ought to try on. Go for a whole month and don't use the word God. Instead, use synonyms. And notice how it clarifies what you actually mean. Beautiful. So as the word volunteering gave way in me to savor, just in the same way that the word prayer gave way to the phrase spiritual mind treatment, I realized that the word God was going to have to be expanded, and I was going to have to find a new name that would help me really understand the concept. So I started reading the books of this culture, this thing called life, this thing called you, Living the Science of Mind, Can We Talk to God? I started reading them all, and I noticed this whole range of possibilities, new names, and maybe you've got some of your own. I encountered such terms as the whole, the universe, or creation, or the thing itself, or ultimate stuff, or the first cause, or the invisible essence, or the power back of creation. And I realized eventually with all of this that whatever it is, it is not a being with an agenda and a curriculum, planning out an obstacle course with mysterious rules, the giver of favors and the withholder of graces. I was invited to think about it in one of its most beautiful forms of everywhere presentness. And that invited me to think about it, to contemplate it as being exactly where I am. I had to start thinking about my life existing within the one life. And all of these new thoughts and these new terms, it changed the way I understood the phrase service to God. It had to grow. Now it became service to creation, Service in creation, service with creation. Service to the love of the universe, service with the... And I realized the concept of service to God of my youth had to give way, because in my youth, service to God really meant a way of maintaining favor with divinity. It really meant a way of securing safe passage through somewhere. It really meant a way of, well, demonstrating obedience. And it had to fall away and be replaced with this larger idea that there is something going on, and I'm being invited to join a dance that is already happening. All right, let me try and say this in a whole nother way. Service is an idea that symbolizes a new attitude in me that recognizes this bigger worldview, this bigger spiritual worldview, in which I realize that my life is part of the one life, and that my action, my doing, is part of the one action of creation, and that my mind is inside of the one mind. So then, with that, service becomes a way of marrying the things I do in the world to how I express my God idea. It's an attitude that recognizes that my life effort, the things I do, is intimately connected to everything and everyone. So savor is not merely doing a project. It is how I express my God. All right, another way of saying the same thing. Savor is a spiritual attitude that recognizes that my life and my life's attitude is connected to everything else and everyone. Okay, I got that. So then that attitude affects the way I show up when I'm helping, because the one I'm helping is now seen as just another part of me, another part of the thing itself. So then the cigarette butts that I pick up were dropped there by a part of me. And that messes with everything. That rearranges my attitude. So now when I'm picking up the butts, I can go deeper beyond the act of cleaning up. And now I become mindful of what I think about that part of divinity that placed the butt there. Right? That upsets everything. And the beautiful thing about the spiritual approach to service is that the tasks still get done. So I'm not just sitting around thinking about oneness. Now I'm meeting it. I still pick up the trash. I still wash the dishes. But the tasks are coming from a different place in consciousness, a place that allows me to grow in compassion, in connection, while at the same time I'm being of practical use. What a marriage. In a way, I could say I'm using the task that I'm engaged, I'm using it as an opportunity to awaken to divinity in me, around me, above me, below me, in the task, everywhere. So this video we were watching of Reverend James Golden, who wrote the prayer that we will hear in just a moment, he tells the story of how in his early training he used to go to meditation retreats at a specific ashram. And at one of these retreats, he was assigned some seva, some volunteer, some spiritual service work to do in the kitchen, where he was to help in the preparation of lunch for some 2,000 attendees. And his job was to chop carrots. Well, he had been in the Marines, and he was properly trained in the Marines, and drawing upon his Marine training, he knew to be focused, efficient, and task-oriented. So he grabbed the carrots and chop, 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 getting the job done, because he wanted to get through it, you know. And the ashram staff, they saw this, and they said, no, that is not how it's done. No. Each resulting carrot piece has to be uniform, 1/4 by 1/4 inch. And so they made a prototype, a model for him, and they put it on top of an upside-down plastic cup as an example for him to measure his cutting by. And he thought to himself as he looked at it, he said, this is going to take a long time, because his mind, his go-to place was task-oriented. And in that moment, he started to future trip. And from the future tripping, the anxiety rises because I can't get this done. He says, I'm all about hurry up so that we can get back to meditating. So he looked at the carrots and the crates of carrots, and he said to them, I don't think I can get this done before lunch. And here's their beautiful answer, the staff. They said, it doesn't matter. What's important is that they're done with love. And that's more important than how many you get done. Because enough will get done. Don't worry about it. That's the shift. So yesterday at this Consciousness of Savor workshop, did I mention it's free? And it's annual? Anyway, part of the thing we do is we assign short 5-minute volunteer tasks to people so we can try on this new consciousness, and some people are sent out to pick up the butts of cigarettes outside the center, and some people are given the task of checking the electronic candles to make sure that they've got enough batteries in them, and one group had the task of attending to the tidying up of a closet of magazines and supplies and books and that sort of thing. But they were given very little to no instructions about how it should be accomplished, who was in charge, and what they ought to have as an end result. But because they had already been in the room, in the conversation already for an hour and a half about this new shift in awareness, they approached the group effort with this whole change. And when they came back into the room, they were literally glowing and smiling and talking about the miracle of how it all just happened. It all worked together. And one person reported the true delight she felt, the deep satisfaction, even though she only organized 5 magazines to be in the right place. You see, and as they talked, I said to myself, they touched the heart of Seva. But not only that, not only were they doing something, they were expressing their God idea. We should get back to Reverend James and his stack of carrots, but he reports a similar shift took place for him. He first had to move off of his standard approach, get as much done as quickly as possible so we can get on with more important things. And in the video, he notes that he recalls they didn't say to him, look, do this as slow as possible. They didn't say that. They said something else. They said, don't do it any faster than your consciousness will allow you to stay in the awareness of spirit. Don't move faster than the speed of love. Now that is advice for life, for relationship, for work, for everything. Move at the speed that allows you to stay conscious of your connection to the thing itself. So he gave himself to the task. We say sometimes I surrendered to the task. And he discovered when he surrendered to the task that actually he was really enjoying cutting 1/4-inch cubes of carrots very, very much. But it only came when he quit future tripping, when he quit looking at how many crates of carrots were still up there. And he noticed that when he was in the task, he was cutting carrots, but not to make certain that no one could say, hey, you're not cutting them right. No, he was just in it, absorbed in it, because he wanted to, and he discovered that in itself, carrot cutting is very fulfilling. It's truly rewarding, it's creative, it demands attention, it's engaging, and it made him happy. If it were up to me to come up with an answer for the question, what is the goal of Seva? I would say it's this: to be present and contented in doing whatever it is you're doing, engaged in the task, while all the while your mind is stayed on the great love of the universe. In other words, the state of mind of savor is present and content. Awareness on the activity, but mind focused on God. And isn't it the case that where our mind goes, that the whole of our life follows? And so it is that practicing in this way, calm mind, God-focused mind, is a way of inviting our whole life to follow. There is another good reason for practicing service as a spiritual practice. And that is because it is a sure and certain path to experiencing a most pure form of love. In the book of the month by Carolyn Mace, Invisible Acts of Power, she addresses it and saying that, there is this common misconception about love. And it goes something like this, that in order to have it, we need another individual on whom to focus it. We need a target, an object, a recipient, and an outcome. And I add to that, and acknowledgement and recognition and reciprocity. Well, look, it's true that loving one another is a beautiful way of expressing love, and loving the people in our lives is very important. And there is also, in addition to that, another kind of love. And that is love without reason. Love for its own sake. Love because that is the way we express our God idea. Love because that's how we do our religion. And I think service as a spiritual practice can give us the opportunity to shift focus away from being task-oriented or target-focused or outcome-obsessed to being simply focused on love without any reason, love without any particular outcome in mind. Love because, like service, it is a deeply satisfying thing to do. Love because, like cutting carrots, is how we express our religion. Jesus said it. He said, well, what's the big deal if you love the people who already love you? That's easy. No, there is a truly satisfying love, which is to love anyway, while picking up cigarette butts. There's a quote from Mother Teresa in this book that goes like this, addressing love. Love cannot remain by itself. It has no meaning. Love has to be put into action, and that action is service. How do we put the love for God into action? Well, by being faithful to the people in our family and faithful to the duties that God, the thing itself, divine energy, the spirit, the love back of all creation, to being faithful to the duties that has caused to rise up in us. And she says, whatever form we are, able or disabled, rich or poor, it is not how much we do, but how much love we put in the doing. So let me read to you Reverend James Golden's prayer, the carrot cutter, as a way of bringing our service to a close. I invite you to breathe in with me and to exhale, letting your eyes close as you let these words find their way into a place in your own consciousness. There is only one life, the life of God. One power, the power of God. One activity, the activity of God, expressing itself in and through all that is. At this very moment, I fully recognize and completely accept that all that I am and all that I do is this one in action. I am an individualized expression of pure Holy Spirit. My every thought, word, and action is the place where God finds new creative expression into this world. By means of me, God is uplifting and healing every individual and situation that I come in contact with. In this awareness, I take this time in prayer to redirect myself to serving God in all that I do. As I enter into this activity, I set aside any concerns, fears, and doubts and allow myself to give all my love and attention to the task at hand. I refuse to let my mind wander. Instead, I focus my attention on the love and service I am performing and on God, which is the power that is acting through me to accomplish the task at hand. I do this work as a spiritual practice, as an offering to God. I accept that this dedication in love I am offering to God by means of this work inspires and renews me as well as others. In this consciousness, I offer myself. May my intent be pure. May I have the courage and discipline to maintain a clean and powerful focus throughout the completion of this task. May my heart be as wide as the sky. May I have the compassion and openness of mind to completely accept and honor the other people who are working with me. May the fruits of this work uplift and heal all those it contacts. May the grace of God awaken me and guide me. Oh, I give thanks for the truth of these words revealing itself to me as I go forward. I give thanks for this opportunity to serve God. I give thanks for my life and the unlimited joy and love that God is in me and as me. And I invite you to breathe in with me again and to exhale into a moment of quiet contemplation.